This is a Flying Cow production.
Well, hello and welcome back to Must Watch Movies here on the Flying Cow. I, of course, am the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson, and here with me today is my co-host,
and special
the
guest.
Lord Jack Allison. How are you, Jack?
I'm doing okay. I also won 2 teddies, you know.
Yes, I know. That's just so much to say. I don't say that much about myself.
Hey, I worked hard for those teddies. That's the only reason I bring them up. I worked very hard for those teddies.
You worked hard for awards you gave to yourself.
No. The Academy gave me the awards. We gotta specify that.
Yeah.
No man has an island.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez. All right.
So yeah, we great to be back. I decided, just side story. I decided to have a wet dream last night, and it turned into
You
a wet
just
night.
decided?
Yeah, it turned into a wet nightmare, unfortunately, because of this movie. Because I was having a great time with the what was involved in the dream, and then suddenly this guy with this really curly head of hair just came up and took his shirt off, and I just could. It looked like he was wearing a sweater underneath the t-shirt. And I was like, okay, I guess the movies I'm watching are now starting to kind of bleed into my my personal life. So here we are.
Oh, that's nothing. The other day, I was listening to a podcast, a defunct podcast, by the way. 80s All Over. It's one of my favorite podcasts. But it was a couple of guys that were going through the movies of the 80s. Unfortunately, they stopped about halfway through 85. And I was listening to an episode from 1984, and apparently I've been listening to this podcast so much that I have started creating episodes in my dreams.
Okay.
And so I don't I know a whole lot more happened, but the only thing that I remember is that they were reviewing a movie. Let me see if I can find it, because now I can't remember it. Let's see. They were reviewing a movie. Oh, what was it called? Oh, I can't remember what it was. But basically it starred Gene Hackman, and it was about a guy who was upset because his son was having sex and he wasn't.
This is a fictional movie, or this is a real movie?
This is not a real movie, but I imagined it in the middle of their run in 84.
Okay.
And oh, here it is. It was called Lifer.
Wait. Okay, sorry. I got. So this is a real movie called Lifer, but you
No.
dreamed it was about.
It is not a real movie.
Okay.
I dreamed that they reviewed a movie called Lifer, does not exist, that stars Gene Hackman, about a man who's upset because his son is having sex and he's not.
Could
and
we?
At the end of the review,
Okay.
the way that they summed it up in my dream was, I can sum up my thoughts about this movie by removing the first and last letters of the word "ife." It makes no sense because that's not a word.
I was gonna say, why is it called Lifer? I was trying to figure out that title.
I don't know.
Could
It was
we,
a dream, Jack.
could
I
an
don't
alternate
know.
title maybe be like something like more on the nose, like Cuck Jr.?
I mean, that would definitely be more on the nose. I don't know.
Sex
Like I
sells.
said, there was a lot more to the review and even the episode in my dream, but that's all I remember.
Okay, well, so what needs to happen? We need to wait 50 years until that podcast becomes public domain, take it back and then continue it with with life. What was it called?
Lifer.
Life. Okay,
Lifer.
so we're gonna call it Cuck Junior. We're gonna workshop it in the next 50 years, and we're gonna bring it back called Cuck Junior, and then we're gonna like have a great time with it. It's gonna be fun. So see y'all in 50
Yeah, I
years.
mean, we'd have to get Gene Hackman out of retirement though.
Yeah,
might
in
be
the
a
next years. I think we can maybe talk him into it. Watch him like die.
Now
like
that premise might actually make some a little bit more sense.
yeah, lifer.
Oh, geez.
Maybe he's a vampire. Maybe that's like the twist.
Maybe.
And so it's like either he has sex or like he lives like for eternity, knowing that his also vampire son is getting more action than he is.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Honestly, bringing him out of retirement would be like really like. I feel like we need to be on Kiefer's podcast talking about this.
Say what?
I feel like we need to be like on like Kiefer's like storytelling podcasts.
Oh. Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. One day.
Yeah.
Speaking of being cucked by vampire children, we've watched a movie this time by your suggestion.
That has nothing to do with that. Yes.
I
yes,
guarantee you I can make a connection to that, but I won't.
Oh, I'm sure you could. I'm not sure I want to hear it.
But, yeah, while you're describing that, I'm gonna pull up my notes and just write some ideas down.
Yeah. All right. So, like Jack said, we decided to watch the movie Modern Romance from 1981. It was written and directed by Albert Brooks, starring Albert Brooks, and also starring Catherine Harold, Bruno Kirby, and a few others.
James L. Brooks.
Yeah, James L. Brooks is in the movie. When I saw his credit pop up, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen James L. Brooks in a movie.
And then you learn why.
Well, I mean, honestly, I realized when he popped up, I was like, who is that? And then I looked it up. I was like, oh, I've never actually seen James L. Brooks. I've just heard the name a million times.
Yeah. But then you see them act and you're like, oh yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I think he works in a movie like this.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a very meta, almost kind of wink to the audience sort of role.
It is very much so. But the movie is basically about two people, Robert and Mary, who basically the movie starts with them breaking up. And it is basically about their on and off again relationship, and just kind of the way dating works, and the way that people just kind of get stuck on each other and lose their minds. But that's seriously all it is. They get back together, they break up, they get back together, they break up. I mean, even at the beginning of the movie, like I said, they break up, and when he's breaking up with her, she says, again.
Yeah.
So we know that this is a pattern that they are in, that they have continued to hold with. I will say what I found really interesting, just starting the film, was, we see them, like I said, we see them have their conversation, they break up, and then we see basically the next day with Albert Brooks's character. There's a good 20 to 30 minutes that it's basically just him, just trying to figure out, how he wants to proceed, and, psyching himself up like this was the best decision I ever made, and then eventually regretting it completely, and all of this stuff. But what I really found interesting was how we stay with him, because a lot of other films would basically, they'd set something up and then they'd fade out and then we'd jump ahead a little bit of time. But we stay with him for every mistake, every bad decision, every, questioning of his decisions, every mood swing up and down for, like I said, this like 20 to 30 minute length of the movie, up until they get back together. But what I found really interesting about this movie, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say I do ultimately think that I liked this movie, but I was in kind of, for a second, I felt like I was in a relationship with this movie like theirs, because there were moments that I was enjoying it, and then I kept going up and down because he is a spoiled brat of a person. You can tell he is extremely, he's immature. He is, really, like he
Codependent.
very neurotic, very codependent, but also very insecure, doesn't know what he wants. And, I would be interested in knowing how many times he broke up with her and how many times she broke up with him. I would imagine that he led most of it, because he's just that type of, neurotic type of person. What I think, and I don't necessarily want to discuss it yet, but I think for me, there are movies that are almost built like a joke. Like the entire film is like the setup of a joke, and whether you like it or not really depends on whether or not the punchline of that ending lands. And to me, this is one of those movies. And when the ending hits and you get the little text at the end, I laughed so hard. Like I wasn't just laughing, I was cackling. Like it was hilarious to me, just the way that the tone of that just was perfect to me. But I do, I've been kind of rambling here. I want to get your take on the film.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Like I liked it overall. I need to watch it again because I feel like there's like maybe some things I could probably like not necessarily pick apart with it, but like I feel like I need to further analyze with it. But I did like it as a whole. I liked the formula of it because it felt like every scene, every interaction had a very sharp turn at the end of every sequence. So like you think it's going one place and then it has a completely like different, again, a very sharp turn that completely like makes it end on a way that's completely unlike the way that it started, emotionally, plot wise, character wise, in a really
well again, I think that the movie moves the way the relationship does. It is chaotic, it is frenetic, it's like, it needs to see a therapist.
Yeah.
I will say for me, I think it's this is, I think, probably the second Albert Brooks film that I've seen, and I'm glad that I saw Defending Your Life. And we're back. Sorry about that, folks. Not having the best internet connection today, but like I was saying, I'm glad I saw Defending Your Life first, because his character in that is a similar type of neurotic, and he also forms a relationship in that movie. It's with Meryl Streep. And the difference between that and this is that Meryl Streep's character is pitched as kind of you know, she's in a completely different place in her life. You know, she is the mature one, and so she can kind of, you know, be a good balance for him. And so knowing that and see, like, I was able to, I think if I hadn't seen that first, this character would have just annoyed me. But because I saw that it was similar to what he had been doing there, that he's basically just presenting, as we said, a completely insecure, neurotic person who, in all honesty, probably is not ready for a relationship. But at the same time, he can't seem to live without one. I think another big difference, though, is that while I think it would be easy to say that she's probably more mature than he is, I think that she is obviously still broken. And I think the easiest way to point to that is, I mean, yes, the fact that she keeps bringing him back or accepting him back or getting back with him. But even that, like, you could see like a, you know, a more mature person just kind of being a stabilizing force in a less mature person's life. But the way that it is done at the end, where within a matter, like not even a full minute, she says we should break up, and then immediately he says let's get married. And within the course of 30 seconds, he is able to basically convince her of his argument, that his argument basically being, our real problem is that we don't have commitment. That's what we need. That's what's going to fix us. We just need to get married. And by the end of that, not only is she willing to take him back, not only does she say yes, but it is a tearful yes, as in, this is what I have been waiting for all my life. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, something's wrong with her as well.
And then we like pull out from the window in the exterior of the house, of the cabin that they're in, and like it starts showing like the end titles, and like they were married. And I didn't I would
they
say
were married what, like a month later in Vegas?
Yeah, a couple weeks
and
later,
then divorced a month later, and now they're currently dating and thinking of getting remarried.
And I was like, I didn't cackle with it per se. I was more like, I was like livid at first when I first saw that first card. I was like, are you kidding me? That's how we're gonna end this movie? And then it shows the follow up saying that they were divorced a month later. I was like, okay, all right, I see what you did there.
Yeah, and then the third one to me sells it, and now they're currently dating, planning to be remarried.
Which is even funnier when you think about it from like watching it like this year versus like the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's very interesting. And what I think is so interesting about this film is that I think if it had been made by, number one, a different filmmaker, and number two, something that could have been made, I feel like I've seen movies like this that don't strike the same tone, because here's, I feel like I've seen movies like this that sell it more as like a romance or things like that, and I'm like, this film, it plays,
it kind of
simultaneously.
It reminded me of like a progenitor to like 500 Days of Summer sort of vibe.
Okay, see, I haven't seen that, but I think it plays the honesty of the relationship, while at the same time playing the humor of the relationship. I think that in a way, the film is mocking the couple while at the same time admitting that this is also real.
Yeah, it felt very relatable in a lot of senses. It felt like a very earnest film in terms of like the conversations, the way that people like cope with that sort of thing, and in like a way that didn't feel like Hollywood schmaltzy over dramatic at a lot of times. Like it took it to like some humorous degrees, but like a lot of it felt like it was humorous because it felt real and like realistic. It wasn't like, you know, he buys her like this crazy extravagant like diamond ring, leaves at her door. No, he buys her like a toy from a toy store and asks like the employee like the same kind of
He
question.
goes to a toy store and buys her a whole bunch of toys.
Yeah.
That to you should be like, that is the key of understanding that this is not this is an emotionally immature, unhealthy relationship, because yeah, he goes and he buys her toys. That's how they relate.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of the movie itself, and I that's why like what I mean, like why like I need like another watch this, because I'm not sure if it's a problem that I have with it or if it's something that like I guess more so like I wish I'd understood going into the film, is that this movie is, in terms of like a romance, it is very one-sided in terms of like the perspective. Like it is very much centered around.
It's very much on his side.
Yeah. Which is something that maybe I kind of wish that I got more out of, given like the title of the film itself. I wish I'd understood more of her side, because I think even like by the IMDb description of this film, it kind of hits you over the head that like this woman is incredibly patient, but you don't really understand much about her beyond that. Like she's a beautiful socialite who has a job at a bank, and she puts up with this shit, but we don't really get a whole lot as far as like what brings her back to him. Whereas like him, it's more so like we like talked about his desperation and his emotional insecurity that kind of keeps like bringing him back to this like relationship, no matter like how it ends up ending, quote unquote. He always like ends up spiraling back towards her and feeling jealous towards her when he has her.
Right. Well, because I mean, we haven't mentioned the fact that they break up and then he goes to work. He is a film editor.
Yeah.
And I will say, we haven't mentioned him at all, except to mention his name, but I actually really enjoyed Bruno Kirby in this movie.
I did too.
I'm sorry.
I did as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that he is, number one, I think just Bruno Kirby is such an interesting supporting actor. He's like, I know that I've seen him in some other things. I know he's also the best friend in When Harry Met Sally, right?
I believe so.
I think he's the one that ends up married to Carrie Fisher.
I know him mostly from like mom movies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was about to say he's been in a bunch of those types of films as well. But he has such an interesting way of speaking, and he's got that New York accent, which lends him to those types of the as you say, the underworld crime mob movies.
Yeah.
But I like him outside of that, because he's just such an interesting dude to like just set in like the regular world, because he's just kind of talking to his friend and he's just like, do you want to be here? You don't have to be here. Just go home. He gives him some quaaludes, to go and just chill. And so like, I really enjoy their interaction. And apparently, he took both on his way home from work, which he was driving. So I'm like, that was super dangerous.
Yeah.
Because quaaludes they're muscle relaxers, right?
Yeah, basically painkillers.
Yeah.
Major
yeah.
painkillers, but yeah.
Right. So, he takes two and he doesn't think he's feeling anything for a while, and then he definitely is. And while he is high on quaaludes, basically sets up a date with a different woman that night. And we find out later, I mean, he calls her basically saying that, he's in love with her, that he's got this huge plan and all this kind of stuff. And then we find out the next night that he didn't actually remember who she was when he made the date.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a very awkward, like that whole sequence is like that's probably my favorite comedic piece from the film.
I felt so bad for that woman, because he picks her up and he confesses that he's like, I don't remember who you are, but we're gonna have a great time. And then they drive, and as they're driving, I'm like, he's gonna take her home. And
as soon as they get in the car, I don't think they exchange like words. I don't think they say like a single word to one another.
They don't say well, I mean, what do you say to someone that is like, hey, when I made this date with you, I didn't remember who you were, but let's go have a great time.
Exactly.
And by the way, I just broke up with somebody.
But like the fact that like they both of them just like kind of get in the car, there's just like that uncomfortable silence, and you just hold on that one shot of them for like a good stretch of time. Honestly, it was a pretty cool filmmaker move that I appreciated. The fact that they just held that for as long as they did. No dialogue whatsoever. The fact that like you only have the radio, the music on the radio, speaking on behalf of the internal monologue of the main character.
I was about to say, because it's a love song. I don't remember what it
Michael
was,
Jackson.
but that's right. It was Michael Jackson. It was a ballad. So definitely a pointed choice. And he just brings her back home, and I'm just like, he is not. And that's when he then goes to get her all of the toys and stuff from the store,
and it works.
Yeah, honestly, like I'm thinking, because he drops off the stuff and he basically keeps his phone line clear the rest of the night. He's convinced that she's going to call because he knows her. He knows how this cycle works, even though they ended their last interaction by both of them saying, don't call me, leave me alone. He knows. And I'm sitting here going, she's not calling and she shouldn't call you, but she does.
Yeah, she liked the giraffe.
Yeah, she's like, I love the giraffe, and I'm just like, oh geez.
Then he goes like straight to her house. He like goes like straight to her house, and then like she just like takes her robe off, gets naked.
Yeah,
and then...
they just go straight to bed.
Yeah,
no discussion. I mean,
and that was the point where we both learned that this is a very hairy gentleman that we have filmed.
I will say I've only seen a guy who has more hair once.
Robin Williams.
No, a guy that I used to do some acting with. I used to do, and it was.
So you were Tarzan. He was the Ip Man, I assume.
No, he was just and I had heard that he was very hairy, and then took off his shirt and was wearing a sweater underneath, and it was an accepted his body hair was nicknamed the Enchanted Forest because woodland animals would get lost in it.
Oh my god, like lice?
No, it was just like his hair was so thick that it was just a joke.
You didn't hug him, did you?
No, not good. That.
Good. That'd be
we weren't that kind of friend.
Hey, you know what? I've had some good backstage interactions with theater, but hey, to each their own. Wow, interesting. Well, yeah. This guy, he definitely reminded me of like Robin Williams with this.
Sure. I will say, and I definitely thought about this the last time the last Albert Brooks movie that I saw, but there's a lot of his shtick that's very similar to like a Woody Allen, but I mean, number one, he's way less problematic. Number two, I think he's more like honest and likable, whereas Woody is like, I'm broken, but isn't that cute? And that's why everybody likes me. And Albert Brooks is more just like, I'm broken, I'm a mess, we should fix it, but I don't know how.
And yet they both still somehow managed to get women way out of their league, respectively.
Both, it's true. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, no kidding. I just gotta say that with the chest hair thing one more time before we move on, just because I feel bad for everyone who watched this like on television around the time that it came out, because I like imagine like the like lower res like television like presentation of this, like you wouldn't be sure if he took all of his clothes off or not. Like it really is a spectacle. But yeah, so like with her character though, like they do bond, they do get back together, they do recoup, and then the rest of the film is basically centered around like his jealousy and insecurity about her actions and her habits to a degree where I'm like, which really...
had been we had already seen his jealousy in the initial breakup.
Yes,
but and honestly, he's convinced that she's gone on another date or all of this other stuff while they're separated this one day.
Yeah.
He's convinced that, she's moved on, even though he also has a date.
Mhm.
So even if she does, what's the big deal?
Yeah, it's the divorcee.
But yeah, exactly. But yeah, I will say there's also a little bit of a side plot going on because he is editing a film. Eventually these two things converge, but he's editing a film for James L. Brooks's character. What is it? Is it David? That's the character's name, right? The director's name. Yeah.
Yes, I believe so.
And of course there's, there were times that I'm like, so we're just in this plot now.
Yeah.
Because like usually if there's a side plot, like it has to do with other characters and like maybe it will, but this is all in Albert Brooks's life, and just while he is dealing with what's going on with his relationship, he's also still a film editor, and he's having to deal with what's going on with this movie. And I will say I definitely found it interesting him, we actually get to see him doing a little editing and then having a conversation with James L. Brooks's character, which, he's convinced that they need to add footsteps in this bit, which that whole thing later on, the Incredible Hulk joke is hilarious. All that. It should say Hulk roar, not Hulk run.
Yeah.
What's that? But
which is again like what I mean by like a fun twist on one of the events. Like you think it's just gonna be like some like big thundering like rumble like we was talking about, and the director will love it. But then it's just like this giant scream. I almost like wish we'd gotten like the director's response to that.
Oh yeah, like if they were just like, yeah, we're gonna play it for him just to see what he thinks. But I will say two things I want to say about his editing. Number one, I thought the change he made was good. I thought that made sense.
I did too.
The other thing is I find it interesting, and obviously they're two different things, but it's so funny how he is so indecisive in his love life because he has no idea what he really wants, and he's back and forth. Yet as an editor has to be so decisive. They can't double, they have to make the changes that they think work and present them to the director. Now, the director might change their mind, but they have to basically decide this is what works best and commit. That's honestly one of the reasons that I don't think I could be an editor, is because especially in creative things, I'm always like, well, that's good, but so is this. I have a hard time picking, whereas he, even though, he is back and forth and cannot decide what he wants, cannot, really commit to anything in his life, except for he can be very decisive when it comes to his editing.
Which I think the film kind of supplements a little bit like with his relationship, because it kind of like posits that he is so used to seeing these like types of like romantic storylines played out within what he edits on day to day that he's become desensitized to it. So like, if nothing else, like he's almost like so focused on the job, you can like kind of infer that's in part why he like treats the film of his actual relationship so much like an actual like movie relationship.
Well, I mean, Mary even says that. She's like, maybe the reason you act like this is because, of the, and he's like, no, I don't think I've seen, he completely, doesn't give it any thought. He's just like, no, that's not why. That's not it at all. I just need a commitment. That's what I need.
But to piggyback off of what you're saying though, with the subplot with the film edit, I honestly like wonder if that's almost like a meta kind of wink, because I agree that it just kind of feels completely separate from like the main story, and I wonder if like in a way that's almost like their commentary on, this could have been cut, but we didn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I mean, the film itself is only like an hour and a half.
It's exactly. It's a very so I'm like
And
wondering
that's
if
with that bit, and that bit is like an extra like 10-15 minutes.
yeah. So maybe like ironically, the editor was like, "Hey, like we need to like make sure this hits feature length. Uh, we need you to include this part in there, but it has nothing to do with the movie. No, I'm telling you, we have to have it in here."
Honestly, I mean, it doesn't, but I think showing how he is in like professionally does add an interesting wrinkle to, because like I said, seeing him be so professional and so good at his job and so decisive, and yet a complete train wreck as a person in a relationship, seeing that juxtaposition, because I think what makes this film work so well are their interesting juxtapositions. I actually absolutely love their use of "You Are So Beautiful" as the theme to the, because it's like it's put on this movie. It's comical. It's hilarious.
Yep.
So I think that's might be why they kept it in, because it does show a completely different side of him. It's kind of nice to see him in control and actually, because like I said, I actually liked his edit to the film better than what the director wanted.
I agree. Yeah. The director didn't really validate it. He just like it was like he didn't really have like a valid reason to do so.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, and
like
then
editor's job at its core is to like convey all the information in the film with all the emotional impact maintained as efficiently as possible. You know,
right.
if you can have like a 2-hour film, but you have a 3-hour film, cut the hour out. If it doesn't add to the experience, and which he did,
Right.
The director didn't really like have like a way to support why they wanted to keep what they did. They're just like, hey, it's really important. And like when he gave him his reasonings, he just says, no, just keep the thing in the picture. We're going to keep going with this.
And the thing that he wants to throw in, make the footsteps louder. He doesn't have a good reason for it. He just wants it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess circling back to like cutting the film, cutting that section out. What would your thoughts be on using that point, that amount of time in the film to put towards her and developing her character and like kind of supplementing her perspective on the relationship?
I will say I do think you have a good point there, because I would have liked to see, at the very least, I would have liked to see her crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why does she need him? Because it's obvious by the end that at least she believes she does. And I'm just like, the way that she's depicted with him, she's so much more together and so much more, but maybe her crazy is outside of the relationship. Maybe, being around him makes her feel sane.
Which I think could have been fun to take advantage of, like if we had maybe gotten a peek at like what she was or who she was talking to in those long distance calls that he found out about, because we never get a definitive answer on who it actually was. Like there's she tells him like that it was her sister's brother or something.
Her brother's sister.
Yeah.
Her brother's girlfriend.
But when he calls her out on it, she's like, like a man answered the phone. She just kind of like that's like when they kind of had their reconciliation moment.
Yeah, that's when she's like, that was when we weren't dating. It doesn't matter. It's when we weren't dating and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, okay, so it was somebody she was seeing, but yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, I would have liked to see more. I think we did such a good job showing, how he really doesn't even need to be in this relationship, period. But at the same time, when he's not, I mean, whether he is or whether he's not, he's absolutely insane.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I would have also liked, if not equal time, at least some time with her as well, to kind of see, you know, if she is just, if she's also, you know, as loose as he is or as crazy as he is outside of the relationship, or if she just is lonely, needs somebody, or needs someone to need her, even.
Yeah, not just a giraffe.
You know, yeah, right. Because, you know, like you said, or like we both said, when she does take him back, they just carry on as if nothing happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk about it, but it's interesting. Physically, they continue on as if nothing has happened, while giving lip service to the fact that, you know, we broke up. Why did we break up? Why do we keep doing this to ourselves? This is a cycle. But even, you know, with the words, they never get to a place of figuring this out.
No.
And like I said, by the end of the film, they end up engaged.
Yeah, they kind of, it kind of feels like they spin their wheels over. They don't really progress as a couple or develop as a couple. They just kind of keep themselves in the same place. And
right.
fight
And their way of fixing that is just pushing the relationship further.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were saying that this was what Kubrick called this the best movie ever made?
Kubrick called it a perfect film, and I will say, putting something like that on a film, any film, I think is too much, because the whole time you're sitting there going, well, I don't think this is a perfect film. What I take away from it is I understand why Kubrick thinks this is a perfect film.
See, that's where I guess I kind of disagree. For me, it kind of feels like how like Kanye West called Bon Iver the best artist of all time. Like you can recognize like Bon Iver is a great artist, but the fact that like Kanye West of all people is the one calling him out for that is it makes me like kind of like spiral into like what do they actually mean by that?
Sure.
And when you kind of compared it off of Kubrick styles, I cannot for the life of me figure out what he means by this being a perfect film. I think it's definitely an earnest film. I think the dialogue is probably appealing the most in terms of like its strengths, but
I think that what he saw in it was the honesty, was the kind of, as we mentioned, kind of the balance between both respecting the fact that these characters are real and also seeing how ridiculous they are, like at the same time, because I do think that is a difficult balance to strike, and I think that they strike it actually really well. But all, you know, Kubrick really liked that kind of heightened tension and heightened reality and that kind of thing. So I can kind of get why Kubrick would really enjoy this film, and I also really enjoyed it, but I don't think I'd call it a perfect movie.
I wouldn't either, and I guess that's like what I'm getting at. Like it's not even so much like the idea of like the storytelling and the earnesty of the film itself, which again there's plenty of. But I think with someone as infamously meticulous as Kubrick was in terms of just like other components of film, like his editing and his shot style, like the shot compositions that he like went to extreme efforts to reproduce. And again, I'm not saying this film is shot poorly per se, but the fact that like it does, nothing struck me as remarkable about like the visual presentation of the film, with the exception of perhaps the date with within like the car that goes awry without any dialogue between them. Like that's fun to me, but beyond that, I can't think of anything that's on the technical element of this film that stands out as being a very meticulously crafted sort of aspect of the film compared to like the rest, if that makes sense. So that's like where I wonder, like, all right, like, are you looking at just like one element of this film when you call it a perfect film, Kubrick, or are you looking at this as, you know, a greater than the sum of its parts situation? If that makes sense. But like I said, I mean, you know, it's I don't want to call it one man's trash, because I wouldn't call this movie trash at all. But
I mean, there's also the thought that just because that's what he, you talk about the shot composition and stuff like that. That's what he cares about putting into a movie. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what he's looking for in a movie that he's watching. You know what I mean?
I think, like I said, I just maybe it's
Like,
more
my craft is different. Like, I'm not necessarily always going to want to make the same types of actually, I might be contradicting myself.
I guess like what I'm saying is if I think of like a visually like a phenomenal film, like something that like maybe Terrence Malick put together, like The Tree of Life is I think a visually gorgeous film. But
Right.
if you put Tommy Wiseau in the lead role of that, it's going to be an imperfect film to me because the acting is going to be atrocious. If that makes sense.
Right. I mean, it might also be that he felt like Brooks achieved something that he wanted to achieve in terms of emotional honesty.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe it was a like he hit a standard that he wanted to achieve. It was a
almost like a perfect storytelling rather than like a perfect film. If you
right,
yeah,
exactly. And honestly, I think that's really what you're gonna get from Brooks anyway. I don't think that you're ever gonna get that type, like a perfect composition or the same type of filmmaking that Kubrick did. I think if you go into an Albert Brooks film looking for something like that, you're going to be disappointed. But I think what he does well, and this movie I think is a great example of that, as we've said, is that emotional honesty, and that kind of perfect juxtaposition of storytelling.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
I overall I think I can get behind that. Like I said, I need to watch it again, particularly like assessing the necessity of things like the editing sequence. Again, it does facilitate things, a connection to the main story with him like investigating like the phone calls between back and forth,
Right.
between her and the long distance stuff. Beyond that,
Right.
I do wonder about how that overall how well it places itself in the film. But
Right.
I can see a parallel to the actions that he has from a professional outlook to his
Right.
romantic outlook. That could be pulled into that. But also, yeah, I am ultimately very glad that I watched this film. Thank you for suggesting it. I would happily watch this one again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a film, like I said, I was kind of wrestling with it as I was watching it. I did feel like I was in this relationship. Like I felt like I was going back and forth with the film the same way the relationship was. But what really made it work for me was that final sequence. And I think now, I mean, I there are definitely other films like that for me. Like to me, other films like that would be Some Like It Hot.
Yeah,
Or wait, is it
like a Sidney
is
Lumet
that the
kind of like
one with
film, a Sidney Lumet kind of film, like Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. To me, I was kind of hot and cold on that film till the end with the old man in the car.
hmm.
To me, that made the whole thing work.
Yeah,
Same thing with
like The
An
Apartment,
American
almost kind
Where
of vibe
I'm
too.
sorry.
The Apartment, it kind of
I
invokes like,
mean, honestly though, I loved The Apartment throughout, but that
oh, yeah,
final line definitely does make the whole thing sing. But and I think Some Like It Hot, isn't that Billy Wilder?
uh, might I think so.
I think
I
that's
think both.
Wilder.
Well, I think both of them are Billy Wilder, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, The Apartment definitely is.
Yeah, I think
But the
yeah.
other one I was thinking of was An American Werewolf in London. And don't
Okay.
get me wrong, I enjoyed that movie, but the end really like made it work for me. The ending of that is just so like it was another one where I literally just busted out laughing when that ending hit. And as I rewatch it, I watch it with the ending scene kind of in my mind as the final hit, the final punchline, and it makes it mean so much more. And I think that even though I think that the ending is a little telegraphed in this one, I think the whole thing, like I said, watching it, I feel like I've seen this before, but I haven't seen it told as it's like, have you ever heard like one person tell a joke and it's okay, I've heard that. And then you hear somebody else tell the exact same joke and it's like, okay, you told it well.
Yes.
It was a similar experience. Like I felt like I was seeing a plot that I'd seen a million times, but I felt like Brooks was doing something with it that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
But yeah, I mean, any final thoughts on the film?
No, like I said, I'm glad I watched it. I would definitely watch it again. I think there's a
Mhm.
lot to apply to life within this film in terms of, like I said, the earnesty was like, I think my favorite aspect of it, just how realistic it felt, how uncontrived the situations like were, how irrational it presents the idea of people being in and out of relationships that they aren't necessarily like either equipped for or emotionally stable enough to effectively navigate, but also
Yeah,
how that can rely so heavily on who the person you're with is as well.
yeah,
um, I would definitely would recommend this to a lot of people, and I think yeah, I'm ultimately glad that I watched it. Yeah, how about you?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely glad that I finally got to see it. Um, you know, going to the question that you often ask me when you suggest a movie, I don't necessarily feel like I missed anything from having not seen it earlier.
Mhm.
Um, and like I said, I am glad that I did see other Brooks stuff before this because it kind of gave me a way in. Because his character could be very annoying, very grating, but when you know kind of where he's coming from and um once you're in the world, I think it works and it makes sense. Um but yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely recommend it to people, especially film fans like us. I think it's definitely one that should be checked out.
I would agree.
All right. Well, I want to go ahead and let people know how they can get into contact with us. So, of course, you can contact us at the Flying Cow Pod on Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of good stuff. You can also email at the Flying Cow Pod at gmail.com. Yeah, let us know what you're thinking. Jack, what you got?
Don't follow me on Instagram. Don't subscribe to my YouTube. Don't follow me on Facebook. None of that. I don't want any of you in my life at all. Um,
Nope.
but we do have a movie next time, and
Oh,
and I have one in mind.
what do I have to watch?
Well,
What are
yeah,
you
and
gonna do to me, Jack?
I have one in mind. What are you talking about? I've had you watch Rashomon. I've had
I
you
know.
watch.
I know. Honestly, so far I've been the one that really only one of my picks has been, but you still liked it.
Yeah, no, I know. I've liked
Yeah.
everything you've shown me so
Yeah.
far. So yeah, so I had one in mind going into this episode, but given the conversation, it feels I've talked about how I've wanted to like change it up, like keep it kind of varied from episode to episode. But
Sure.
this one, I'm gonna go with. There's gonna be a lot in common with this one and the movie we reviewed this time. This movie
Okay.
also has it was directed, written by, and stars the same human being, and it was released 10 years exactly after this movie was.
Okay. So it's
Our next
another Albert
movie,
Brooks.
huh?
It's another Albert Brooks.
No, it's not Albert Brooks.
Oh.
Uh, but it
Oh.
is no, it was written, directed, and stars the same human being that is not Albert Brooks. This movie,
Okay.
our next movie, will be 1991's Nothing But Trouble.
Oh my! Are you serious?
Wait, have you seen it?
No, but it's
Fantastic.
infamous.
We're gonna have a
I
great
would
time.
say.
We're gonna have a wonderful time.
Wow. Oh, geez. I will have a story to share
Please do.
about
I look
that
forward to it.
that I heard on another podcast.
Okay.
But yeah, okay. All right. Nothing but trouble. All right. Well, thank you for that, Jack. But yes, that is what we will be doing next time. But until that time, moo.
Bah. We did it.